Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate!
Hello everybody, Chocolate Guy here, and welcome back to another countdown. I'm so sorry no new videos came out in April like I said they would. Some stuff came up in my personal life, and also because I decided to make this video in a very different way from my previous ones, I was still messing around with a lot of things, which made this video take a lot longer to make than some of my previous ones on top of that. But don't worry, we're back to multiple videos this month because you will actually get 3 big list videos, because I decided to make this a top 10 for reasons I'll discuss in a little bit. So there will be part 1 now and part 2 later this month. And at the end of the month, there will be a top 5 worst Hey Arnold seasons 1 through 3 episodes list. Also, another video will release this month, being the start of a new series on this channel, which I won't say anything about now because I want to keep it a surprise. So, a lot of good stuff is on its way, and I have even bigger plans come June once I'm off of school, which I will also keep quiet about for now. But trust me, you should be very excited for a lot of new content that's on its way. But yeah, you'll be able to see how different this video is once we get into it, at least presentation-wise. And with all that said, let's actually get into what this video is actually about. So what is there to say about Season 3 other than it's great? It truly and honestly is. And I've already stated it is easily my favorite season of the show. And all this is because this season takes what worked about the last 2 seasons and rolls with it, taking every aspect of the show farther than it has ever been pushed before, and fleshes out a lot of ideas, concepts, and characters from previous seasons while adding brand new ones, which are just as great or even better. If Season 1 was about introducing us to these characters and certain topics/themes the show tackles, then Season 3 is about developing those characters and putting them in stories that use them to their full potential and make you view them in a different light, while going further with certain stuff we may have seen before, but honestly puts a much different spin on it. Well, at the same time, there's a lot of other episodes that are just really fun, simple concepts being played out in a fun way. This season finds the right balance of simple, fun episodes and something that tackles a really interesting concept or theme that goes much further to show off something truly special involving one of these interesting characters. This makes it the most solid season when it comes to the episode lineup, and how good its highs are along with the quantity of them, which is why I decided to make this a top 10. It didn't feel right to only talk about 5 amazing episodes plus honorable mentions on this list. This season is just when the show hit its peak and balanced everything that made the previous seasons great, but goes so much further with everything, leading to so many fantastic episodes. Some of the best episodes from any show ever are in this season, and it is personally one of my favorite seasons from any show. It is legitimately that good, which is why it shows this show off at its very best. And yeah, while not everything here is amazing, there are some very standard episodes in the mix. It's still such a solid season, and when the season knocks it out of the park, it knocks it out of the park. So, enough wasting time. Strap yourselves in, because this is gonna be a fun one. For part 1 of my biggest countdown so far, here is my top 10 best Hey Arnold Season 3 episodes. Because I'm going to be talking about a lot more episodes on this list, because there are so many great ones this season, this is definitely a list I could see more people disagreeing with overall, at least on where I place the episodes, especially this one. which is sad because I think this is a fantastic episode and highly underrated, and I'm glad I get to talk about it more here than I would have had this just been a top 5. Sure, this episode barely cracked the list, but it is still one of the season's best, proved by the fact that it's even on here despite so much competition, which I'll talk about in the next video. I think what makes this episode great is that Gerald having his voice change due to his surgery is a great representation of someone's body changing in a drastic way that affects them deeply for multiple different reasons. Sure, you can take this completely at face value, which has Gerald change in a weird way he's not ready for, right in the middle when he gets to do something he loves, and shows off how he deals with this in a really interesting and introspective way, while showing how everyone around him reacts, and having him come to terms with this by using his new voice to show everyone and himself he is still Gerald, the same Gerald they all know, he's just a little bit different with his different sounding voice, while doing the thing he loves. They do a great job showing the situation off and diving deep into Gerald's character in the process, while telling many great jokes. But what really pushes it over the edge for me is just how smart of an episode it is. Going through big changes like this is something that happens to everyone, and the episode made a great choice to have it be his voice that changes, because that's something that can resonate with so many people, and it does a good job just showing off that experience in a way that gives this episode an extra level of interest, because you like Gerald, and you've been through this before. And for older kids starting to go through this stuff, I could see it really resonating. Sure, if you're not in that age group, you won't resonate with it that much, but you can still understand Gerald's pain to an extent. And because you like him, it makes you more engaged to see how he deals with this situation. There are other episodes that I find more interesting and obviously do connect with me more, but this is still a clever little episode to start the list. So you'll probably see a pattern with most of the episodes here. Because this season is so character development focused, a lot of the episodes revolve around that, but there's a much bigger reason why they're on the list. Here we have a great Harold-centric episode that shows him in a new light through him getting a job as an assistant butcher. How he is just a stupid kid, so he steals something because he's hungry, and then gets called out on it on moral and religious grounds, which leads him to have to work at that place as he slowly starts to love working there and realizes this is his passion. But he has to find a way to really make it up to Mr. Green because his initial work wasn't enough, so he can keep working there after his original time is up. This is such an interesting plot that shows off Harold's character in a great way and develops many sides of him. You really get to see how this dumb kid who steals when he is hungry finds some joy in his life through working this job, and you want to see him keep it despite justifiable opposition. This story progresses in such a nice way. You really get to see how Harold changes for the better as he gets more and more into his job because of how far they go showing all this off. What really makes it work though is his relationship with Mr. Green. It's truly the strength of the episode. How Harold and his relationship starts out rocky because of what Harold did, but Harold comes to really appreciate him and want to learn from him. Along with that, just realizing that he is the way of keeping this job. But Mr. Green has so many reasons to dislike Harold. And the conflict is so interesting, and it's really cool to see the relationship between them grow, which leads to great scenes that take the plot in interesting directions. How Harold doesn't care at first and just does a really bad job, which leads Mr. Green to dislike him more and more, but when Harold falls in love with the job, he has to redeem himself, and he tries so hard, but Mr. Green at this point just won't give him the time of day, to the point point where he gets desperate and he just wants to keep this job in the most superficial and dumb way possible, which makes the situation even worse. It's so interesting, and all of this leads to a really satisfying and heartwarming ending because of how well the story is handled. But what really pushes this episode over the edge for me is how well it shows off the benefits of kids finding something they're deeply interested in, like a lax job, which pushes them in a great direction in life. It's just so cool, and it's great we get to see this through Harold's story, and it's something I can relate to quite a bit. But this isn't the most interesting or complex episode of the season, and isn't even Harold's best appearance here, which is why it's only number 9. But dang is it great. Alright, here we go. Season 3 is the season of many of the show's bests, and this is one of the first we'll be discussing, because this is the best Olga-centric episode of the series. This is literally just Olga Comes Home, which is an episode I already love, by the way, but 10 times better, because this episode narrows the scope a little bit, and does that in an interesting way. They use her fiancé as a great way to show how screwed up she is for multiple different reasons, and how all this affects Helga's already lukewarm relationship with her. Sure, we don't go that far into her character, but that's not what the episode is about. It's about her dynamic with Helga being shown off in an interesting way through this situation, and they do so much with it and such a good job at showing it. You really get to see why she has such a complicated relationship with Olga, and what's making her push Olga to suffer, and having her realize this scheme might be bigger than she expected, which at first is a good thing to her, which is so interesting and makes this episode even more impactful when she realizes she just can't be this awful, and realizes how kind of screwed up Olga is, and how she's not mentally in the right place, and it's really awful for her to push her towards this dude who's completely using Olga, and she rightfully so puts the dude in his place. Sure, her treatment of Olga at first could come off as overly cruel to some, but if you know the context, it feels like something Helga would do, and it's really interesting to see this whole scheme from both angles, Helga and the boyfriend's angle, play out, and once again makes the final scene more satisfying. It's so great to watch Helga come around on this and realize that she can't do this to her sister, who is clearly suffering and who's going to suffer even more once this dude takes advantage of her. So she comes to the decision to put this guy in his place, and it leads to such a great scene. It's one of the best scenes of the season. Sure, the plot might seem basic, but it does a good job showing Helga's views on her sister through this interesting conflict, and it's so incredibly interesting because of that, earning it a spot on this list. The first special on this list, and it won't be the last. Yeah, I know, classic Hey Arnold specials are all great, and the only surprise here is that this episode isn't any higher, which was a surprise for me too. It was because of strong competition. But enough about that. Why is this episode fantastic, you may be asking? Well, because even though this isn't the season finale, it works quite well as one of the final episodes, because it puts our characters in a fun situation, gives us a new perspective on them in a way, while having all the minor characters play some sort of role in the episode, and ending on a note that ends the season in a nice and thought-provoking way of what it might be hinting at, similar to Arnold's Valentine's. And you know how much I love that episode. Look, I get that doing a show plot to get a kiss from someone is a very generic and really stupid plot, but that's not really what this episode is about. Sure, that is Helga's goal, but it's more about the experience of being in the school production of Romeo and Juliet, and the fun of Helga having to get 4 different girls to quit so she can be Juliet to Arnold's Romeo. And because she goes through all this effort to do this, it makes you want to see Helga succeed. Also, Helga states while she is doing this because she likes Arnold, she also wants to see if something would come out of this. By her making a move this bold, would it lead to something? And this is shown off little by little throughout the episode, especially when she reveals her crush on Arnold to Lila to get this role. It's such a great scene. And it shows just how important this is to her. And while it doesn't lead to anything, you can tell Arnold might know something is up. And that's really cool. And it's a great way to end the season. This episode is just so much fun. It has some great moments that really make this simple plot about the show and Helga getting all these girls to quit so she can become Juliet a lot more impactful. And sure, they don't go super far with showing all this off, which is why it isn't any higher, but those great moments and little details really push this one over the edge for me. Also, I can really connect to an episode that tackles crummy school theater thanks to personal experiences, and they get so much little scenes and jokes out of it, and it's really cool and really funny. And I can also connect to parts of the story a bit more than I'm willing to admit. But there are still better episodes and specials in this season.
You can offer me a diamond-plated pearl. You can send me all the riches.
This is an episode I really struggled to figure out where I wanted to put it. I'm gonna be honest and say when I first watched this show many years ago, this was my favorite episode of the entire series, much less this season. Obviously, it's nowhere near that spot anymore. I definitely overhyped it a lot on first viewing. It's not that good, but damn, this is still a great episode, so it makes it hard to place it amongst its contemporaries, especially compared to some great and maybe higher concept contemporaries. But I decided to place it just outside of the top 5, and I think that's about right. This episode is so incredibly simple. It's literally just about Mr. Hyunh getting famous in a weird way, and then coming to terms with that no matter how cool this may be, and how many people he is making happy by doing this, and how many places this could take him, this just isn't what he wants to do. And he has to admit that in front of a lot of people at a place that was originally gonna be his shot at stardom. Honestly, what makes this episode so great is everything that happens just serves as a setup to that gut punch of an ending. What's really weird is, all things considered, this episode should not work. This plot sounds really cliched, and while the episode definitely could have been, they play around with the cliches of this kind of plot in a really interesting way. And while the entire episode just kind of being set up to one really impactful moment also could have made the episode really boring and make that moment the only thing that matters, but they do it in a really interesting way by making that setup so engaging and cool just to see Mr. Hyunh go through this experience, and that makes the ending way more impactful. They mess around with how you think a rise to fame story would be told, and get a lot of interesting mileage out of it. But as I said, this episode is just great setup to an interesting ending. They do such a good job showing off this situation in a very short amount of time, and making you never quite know where Mr. Hyunh stands on how he wants to go about his fame. At first, he just wants the simple life, just singing for fun even though he has an amazing voice. But once this fame is thrusted upon him, thanks to Arnold and Gerald messing around, you're never quite sure how much he's enjoying this, how much he misses his simple life, how much he's willing to give up for this. It's just very interesting to see this experience be shown off, and slowly but surely you come to understand where Mr. Hyunh stands on this whole situation, but you're still not quite sure. So when he comes to make that decision in the ending, you're still not quite sure what he's going to do, and that's just what makes the episode so fascinating and such an engaging watch. It's such a great look at Mr. Hyunh through this plot. At first, he does enjoy his simple life, but he does seem to enjoy this fame and making people happy. But he's not quite sure if he's willing to take this to the next level. And to see him come to such a tough decision about where his life is going to go next in a big way in front of all these people, and because of how the episode is set up where you're not quite sure what he's going to do, it's really powerful. It's one of the most powerful scenes in the show because of how the episode sets it all off and how important his decision feels, and how, in the end, it leads to him being more happy than him choosing the other option would have been. And having him play his song for fun on top of the boarding house and letting the episode play out like that is the perfect way to end this episode. He truly figured out what he wanted to do, he came to that decision, and he's happy. And I think that really resonates with a lot of people, including myself. Oh, and also, I think the song in the episode that they use is really great. It's an awesome song and works on multiple levels to enhance parts of this episode. I mean, it's a song that he created on his free time called Simple Things, which thrusts him into stardom and makes him have a very complex debate about whether he wants to have a life of fame or a much more simple life. I think it's really clever, and I like how they use the song a lot, along with it being just a great song that we get to hear many times throughout the episode, and in full at the end of the episode. It works on multiple levels to enhance parts of the episode. Sure, this episode isn't the most complex thing, at least within Season 3, but I always get really engaged in Mr. Hyunh's story, and, to put it bluntly, am pretty moved by how they portray his character. Making huge, life-changing decisions is something that a lot of people can relate to, and it does hit me particularly hard, even though I can't quite relate to it. I'm not really sure why this episode hits me as hard as it does. It just kinda does, for lack of a better explanation. It's very powerful, and I think what pushes it over the edge for me, above some other much more higher concept episodes that do more with their plots, is that ending and just how they go about setting it up. But it still wasn't enough to make the top 5. And with that, the first half of this list is done. I hope you enjoyed this list so far, and hope you're looking forward to the big event of me talking about the top 5 best episodes of one of the best seasons of television, which will be coming next in part 2. If you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe to get notified when part 2 comes out, and for other similar content in the future. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I have some big stuff coming up for new content, so stay tuned for that. Also, leave a comment telling me what you thought of my list, and what your own list would have been, and predictions for what you think will make it into my top 5. This is such a good season, so I'd love to hear your opinions. Guesses and just general thoughts on the video are really appreciated. And with that, part 2 will be coming soon, so until next time, this is Chocolate Guy, signing off.